Tonight, the media party's war against our Canadian Armed Forces takes one day off for Remembrance Day. And later in the show, an exciting announcement of a new host for a show on TheRebel.media. That's all ahead. It's November 11th, and you're watching The Ezra Levant Show. Why should others go to jail when you're the biggest carbon consumer I know?
There's 8,500 customers here, and you won't give them an answer.
You come here once a year with a sign, and you feel morally superior.
The only thing I have to say to the government about why I publish it is because it's my bloody right to do so.
Today is Remembrance Day. Remembrance Day, to me as a child, was about old people. We were lucky back then. Canada hadn't been at war since Korea. Images about those old wars were in black and white. It all seemed so antiquated, but not now. More than 150 Canadians died in war in Afghanistan. Most of them are younger than I am. And for every soldier killed, there were many more who were injured, including psychological wounds too. And then, of course, there are other Canadian casualties of war, such as Corporal Nathan Cirillo, murdered at the National War Memorial by a Muslim jihadist, targeting him precisely because he was a symbol of our values and our national sovereignty. So Remembrance Day isn't just about history now. It's about the present. It's about how we think about and act towards those patriotic souls amongst us who risked their lives for our lives and for our national values like freedom and Western civilization. It seems so old-fashioned and chivalrous, those values, the opposite of the politically correct, selfish, social justice activists who dominate popular culture these days. Today, I think of the new Liberal Defense Minister, Harjit Sajjan, who should be a source of pride for every Canadian, and who was greeted with delight by the left, even anti-war Liberals who normally hate our soldiers. They couldn't contain their excitement at this image, a true warrior, a military leader who served several tours of duty in Afghanistan. Those Liberals probably didn't recognize those old emotions of pride in our soldiers because popular culture has told us to erase such thoughts from our hearts. But there is something great and grand about someone who would risk his life to fight for his country, and with such a mischievous smile too. That's a man from a different age in a way. And for a moment, the popular culture respected him. I hope that lasts. I think Harjit Sajjan was an inspired choice for defense minister. I mean, Liberals usually disparage military things.
Why aren't we talking more about that? Why aren't we talking more about the kind of humanitarian aid that Canada can and must be engaged in, rather than, trying to whip out our CF-18s and show them how big they are?
I admire Harjit Sajjan's service, and I would point out, by the way, that Sikhs serving in the Canadian military are part of the long tradition of Sikhs serving loyally as soldiers in the British Empire, going back literally centuries. Here are great British military uniforms from the 19th century in India. British uniforms, let me say the obvious. These are not the uniforms of radical Islam, misogynistic burqas obscuring the face of women. These are proud symbols of free men. There's no comparison. It's very British to wear a turban, actually, has been for centuries before Canada was even its own country. And Sikhs also fought, wearing turbans of course, with the British in World War I and II. It's actually a great military tradition. I somehow sense, though, that if the defense minister posing with a grin in military fatigues and sunglasses weren't Sikh and weren't wearing a turban, Liberals wouldn't quite be able to muster love for him. I think generally the left dislikes all things military, at least on our side. The left can't get enough of the bad boys in Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State. The media itself has created the mystique around terrorists. What a disgrace that Maclean's magazine chose their Remembrance Day edition to put Omar Khadr, the Al-Qaeda terrorist, on their cover, calling him a victim. We're doing our best to honor Remembrance Day here at TheRebel.media. It is a conscious part of our editorial identity. We support the troops. We believe in fighting against the Islamic State, not bailing out, abandoning our US and NATO allies, as Trudeau promised to do in his very first phone call with Barack Obama. And it's a disgrace that John McCallum, the minister in charge of Muslim migrants, proposes to turn Canadian military bases into social work centers, public housing centers, for tens of thousands of migrants. Our soldiers won't be soldiering, they'll be nannies now. I don't think that's what people like Harjit Sajjan signed up for. Most of our support for the troops here at The Rebel is just moral support. We're just a media company. But moral support is important to press the real decision makers in government to continue to give soldiers and veterans what they need. And of course, moral support is important directly. It's the least our soldiers deserve, given what they risk and often sacrifice for us. Occasionally, we take action, like last year when our viewers raised $100,000 for the fatherless son of Nathan Cirillo, or when we raised close to that amount for the fatherless children of U.S. Army medic Christopher Spear, who was murdered by Omar Khadr. It's the least we could do. Actually, that's not true. There is a lot less we could do. Watching the rest of the media party gives you a hint of that. One day a year, they pretend to love our soldiers. The other 364 days a year, they play gotcha, reporting any rumor of misconduct about our soldiers. It's bizarre to watch how the CBC in particular and the rest of the media drag down our military at the same time as they pull up terrorists like Khadr. It's a psychological sickness. And I have my doubts that even a media celebrity like Harjit Sajjan will be enough to change that popular culture. And let's see if he's enough to change the anti-soldier bias within his own party. Like John McCallum, who I mentioned just a moment ago. Here's John McCallum 5 years ago when he was in opposition with the Liberals, saying that the Canadian military was engaging in war crimes in Afghanistan, that our military was handing over Afghan detainees knowing that they were going to be tortured. He said that was a war crime. John McCallum, a cabinet minister, once again under Justin Trudeau, says our military committed war crimes in Afghanistan, the very war in which Harjit Sajjan served. Take a look.
And the fact that they may have been committing war crimes, handing over detainees knowing that they were very likely to be tortured, that is a war crime. And the fact that they're covering it up, I think many Canadians do care about those things as well as caring about economic issues.
You know, we could digress here and talk about who's handing over. Is it the Canadian soldiers who are you're accusing of war crimes? Is it the government? I don't want to go there in this interview.
It's the government.
I'm having a hard time with that, but I don't want to go there right now.
And look at how the CBC handled that shocking comment. Oh, I won't ask you to explain your shocking accusations. That's a digression, said Suhana Maharshand, who was interviewing McCallum. So she won't go there. I'm sure it's just a coincidence that Maharshand was once engaged to Liberal MP Adam Vaughan and that they have a child together. I'm sure that had no bearing on her decision to let McCallum's blood libel go unchallenged. But it's not just McCallum. Here's another Liberal from 2010 saying our military, maybe even Sajjan, sent people to torture. Take a look.
The Canadians would get a complete story about who ordered the torture, who actually sent people to torture, and what did the government know and why did they not take any action?
That Liberal also says our generals are morally weak and legally flimsy.
General's defense, as someone said, was morally weak and legally flimsy.
Do you think that's all over? I don't know. It's been a tag team, Liberals and the Liberal media. Remember a few years ago, the CBC repeated without a shred of evidence the slander by University of Ottawa professor Amir Attaran that our Canadian troops had committed war crimes in Afghanistan and that the Canadian government was covering it up. Take a look.
Amir Attaran is a law professor who's been digging deep into the Afghan file and says he's seen uncensored documents suggesting the real reason for all the secrecy.
If these documents were released, what they will show is that Canada partnered deliberately with the torturers in Afghanistan for the interrogation of detainees. There would be a question of rendition and there would be a question of war crimes on the part of certain Canadian officials. That's what's in these documents, and that's why the government is covering up as hard as it can.
The CBC must have repeated Attaran's baseless accusation 1,000 times after that. Of course, they didn't mention that Attaran was a significant financial donor to the Liberal Party. The Conservative government actually appointed an independent inquiry staffed by 3 senior judges that reviewed tens of thousands of classified documents. Opposition MPs were included on that review committee, including Stéphane Dion, now the Foreign Affairs Minister, and they did not find a single email, a single memo, a single shred of evidence to support those accusations. But the CBC slandered our troops as bigoted, racist war criminals for years. They always do this. And they often break their stories right before Remembrance Day. A few years ago, they claimed that a Canadian Armed Forces skit at a mess hall that poked fun at Osama bin Laden was racist because it made fun of bin Laden. They seriously did that, and the CBC trotted out their government comedian, Sean Majumdar, to explain why it was racist for soldiers to mock bin Laden, but not for him to mock bin Laden. Oh, but apparently it's okay for our soldiers to kill him. What a weird world the CBC lives in. And this year, shocker, they've come up with more unproven allegations just on the eve of Remembrance Day, like the Amir Adaran allegations that were repeated endlessly. Like this smear, for example. Headline, Canadian airstrikes linked to second allegation of civilian casualties in Iraq, CBC has learned. Oh, really? Let me read you the first sentence. Canadian fighter planes have now been connected to a second airstrike in Iraq that has been reviewed by the Pentagon for possible civilian casualties, CBC's The Fifth Estate has learned. So Canadian planes may have been connected to an airstrike that is being reviewed for maybe, possibly. How many wiggle words are in there? How much of a fudge factor? Canadian planes may have been? May have been what? Connected? What does connected mean? Did they drop the bombs or not? What does connected mean? Being reviewed for possible casualties? Possible? There might not be any casualties and the review isn't done yet and the planes may not have been connected. But look at that. Look at how the CBC called it exclusive. So scandalous that they put the word in red, exclusive. The CBC was warming up for their annual Remembrance Day attack on our Canadian Armed Forces. Just a complete smear. That was October 29th. They love to hold off on their attacks for right before Remembrance Day. Here's another. Just last week. Oh, the timing, yeah. This one is even weirder. It's more recycled Afghanistan gossip about an incident that allegedly happened in 2011. Another huge, breathless story held for the week before Remembrance Day. But let me read just the most gorgeous part of it. Let me quote. The allegations were made to the Complaints Commission in a one-page typewritten letter that was sent anonymously in February from an airport hotel in Toronto. So that's what you got? An anonymous one-page letter faxed in that makes 5-year-old allegations on top of all the other allegations that were exhaustively reviewed and dismissed. But look, CBC's gonna CBC. They will literally take any opportunity to smear our troops, and they just got a $150 million reward for helping to elect Justin Trudeau. Look, the media party's war against our Canadian Armed Forces is constant. It takes a 24-hour breather on Remembrance Day, and then it gets right back to work demonizing our side and apologizing for our enemies. I just hope that in Harjit Sajjan, Canada has someone who can fight against this anti-soldier bigotry, first within his own cabinet, and then in the wider popular culture. Stay with us. More after this short break.
Looking for the perfect gift? Did you know TheRebel.media has a store? Make a statement with a t-shirt. Have your morning coffee in a Fearless Travel coffee mug. There's even an Ezra Levant bobblehead. It's a one-stop shop for the perfect gift. And don't forget to pick up something for yourself. Go to TheRebel.media/store to find out more.
Welcome back to the show. I'm Ezra Levant, and joining me in studio is an old friend of mine, and I'm sure someone familiar to most of our viewers, my friend Faith Goldy. Great to see you again, Faith.
Thanks for having me here, Ezra.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Remembrance Day, I know it's a day you think about because, I mean, you're a patriot and you respect the military, and you're not afraid of military things. I mean, you like, for example, firearms. You don't have this Canadian, oh my God, it's a firearm. We're supposed to be peacekeepers, but not even with guns. So, I mean, there's a cultural affinity you have to patriotism and to Remembrance Day. What are your thoughts on this day?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, some folks will muse, it's Christmas. I wish every day was Christmas. I personally wish every day was Remembrance Day. I think that there has been an active re-education that has gone on through media and more specifically within academia that says we Canadians are just peacekeepers. No, actually, we're peacemakers. From the Boer War to Korea to Afghanistan, never mind the two great wars. And what we have to remember is that peace is made oftentimes with blood being spilled. So to our ladies and gentlemen, our men and women in uniform, past, present, and future, I salute you today on this special and I would say sacred day. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Faith. Look, there's so many things like this that I regret since the demise of the Sun News Network. A lot of voices that say the sorts of things that you just said have been silenced. And I believe our experience here at TheRebel.media is there are millions of Canadians who want to hear that. What are the kind of things that you've wanted to say over the last 9 months that because the Sun News Network was gone, maybe they weren't said enough and maybe Canadians didn't hear enough?
I don't think we have enough time to get them all out right now, Ezra. But when it comes to just overarching topics that I know, I felt like my voice certainly wasn't being heard out in mainstream media. The Syrian refugee crisis, the so-called sort, I would call it a mass Muslim migration, infiltration into Europe. I was in Greece, when these first cohorts came into our islands. As well, euthanasia. Have you heard anything about it, Ezra? Because I certainly haven't. And by the way, it's about to become de facto and de jure illegal in this country in February. We just had an entire election campaign.
It wasn't even mentioned.
Not at all.
The media don't want to talk about it, the politicians don't want to talk about it, and you can see why. They either like the way it's going from the courts, or they just think, oh, it's a yucky question, I don't want to get into it.
Absolutely, and I'd say finally, and for a lot of my, my buddies, my friends out there who I know are followers of TheRebel.media, Trudeau's gun policy, zero mention of it made in mainstream media. Meanwhile, he enumerated in bullet points what he's going to do, which is essentially to turn the clocks back, to add yet more layers of bureaucracy to what is already a bureaucratic heavy process, and then basically give the classification process back to the unelected RCMP lab rats. So these are the sorts of things where it's like, hey, the information is there, but the media is not going out to get it, and then the commentators, the editorial staff, are not going on to then dissect it.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I think there's a few ways that the media party wreaks their will on the world. One is what stories they choose to even cover in the first place. The second lesser one is how they cover it. I want to let the cat out of the bag a little bit here today. I know we're not formally ready to announce anything, but you have made one of my dreams come true. You are going to be joining us here at The Rebel as the host of your own show.
That's right, Ezra. I'm actually really looking forward to it. I hope folks out there are too. It's going to be a weekly show called On the Hunt with Faith Goldy, so it gives you a little bit of a hint of the sorts of stuff that we're going to be covering. So yeah, we haven't picked which day we're going to air it on yet, but I promise you it's coming up very, very soon, for sure before Christmas, 100%. Right. I'm going to be here. I look forward to being back on camera with you, Ezra, being able to, have this platform to talk about things that matter to Canadians that aren't frankly being served in today's media market.
I'm thrilled, and I know you've been meeting with our producers here. Give me a hint.
Team, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, some of them were from the old Sun News Network, some are new folks. I want to ask you, I mean, I know you haven't set the program down in stone, but what kind of things are you looking at? Will you be out in the street? Will you be in the studio? Will you have guests? Have you solidified some of those things?
Absolutely. So folks who watch me on The Sun will know I love being in the thick of it. I love being in the front line. So I'm going to be at Queen's Park. I'm going to be on the streets talking to, your median Canadian voters, seeing what they think about particular issues. And when it comes to the actual contents, I have made a vow to myself and to my team that I'm going to be working, part of your team. I'm going to be talking about firearm stories every single week that we find one that's going to matter to Canadians, and social issues as well, because I think that when it comes to pro-life issues, they're frankly not being met out here in the Canadian media market. So that's going to be part of it, and we'll give you, what's stories to watch and what I make of the stories of the week.
How about foreign affairs? I know you were strong on that at this.
Yeah, absolutely. Ukraine is my baby, so to speak. I come from Ukraine and Greek heritage. Both of my people are persecuted right now. You know my stance on Vladimir Putin. He is a pariah, he is a megalomaniac and a psychopath, and he is left unchecked. Not to mention the fact he is now sending, steels and soldiers towards our Arctic, as well as the Middle East. It's on fire right now, and we have to be out there telling the truth.
I am thrilled. Personally, it means a lot to me that you're joining our team. I know our viewers are going to be delighted, and you were a hit at The Sun.
Thank you.
And I look forward to you making this show your own. And we've given you carte blanche to really shine and to let Not that you were keeping anything in, but it's going to all come out.
I have to say, well, part of the reason why I wanted to come here, you know what, Justin Trudeau won on October 19th. On October 20th, on the Tuesday, I was at your desk saying, Ezra, what can we do here? Because I need this editorial freedom, and I know you're the one to afford it. And for the folks at home, I really am doing this for you, because I scream and yell at my TV as much as you do. And so I hope to give you a comfortable home at my new program airing here on TheRebel.media.
Well, that's amazing, Faith. I'm thrilled. We'll let it go for now until we have official news, like the day and the time and things like that. But we do know the name of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
On the Hunt with Faith Goldy.
There you have it. Well, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us. That's an exciting scoop you heard today. After our short break, we'll talk with Brooke Goldstein from New York. Stay right there.
So open-minded that the brains have fallen out.
What's the point that you're making?
The point that I'm making is that if you're going to propose a massive overhaul to the way the economy is developed in terms of carbon tax, cap and trade, other forms like that, it helps to have some science that is in fact settled.
Well, there's a new anti-Semitism in the world. I see the European Union is actually moving to label products made in the West Bank. Perhaps they'll use a yellow Star of David. Perhaps they'll use the German word Jude, as they used to do under the Nazis. Well, we see this kind of anti-Semitism even creeping into the United States, even to New York City. And joining us now to talk about one particular case of it is our friend Brooke Goldstein, the director of the Lawfare Project. And she joins us now from New York. Brooke, great to see you again. I understand that criticism of Israel is not necessarily the same thing as anti-Semitism. I can criticize the government of Italy without being anti-Italian, but in many cases, being anti-Zionist is really just the same thing as being anti-Semitic, isn't it?
Absolutely. And when it comes to boycotts that originate from the Arab League, they'll tell you themselves while they're boycotting the state of Israel because it's Jewish. They have no qualms about it. And what we see going on in the United States that you alluded to is the Arab League anti-Semitic, bigoted, racist boycott now trickling down into our federally funded airports.
Well, let's talk about that because JFK Airport, one of the great airports in America in terms of traffic and destinations, it's really the international airport for America's greatest city, New York. Tell me about Kuwait Airways. And Kuwait should have a special love for America because America, with allies, liberated that little dictatorship from Iraq at the cost of blood and treasure. Tell me how Kuwait, those little dictators, that little emirate, has repaid America with bigotry at JFK Airport.
Well, you said it correctly. Kuwait is repairing our kindness, basically, with operating within our country in violation of the law. And we have a situation where Kuwait Airways, which is the state-owned airline of Kuwait, which is a member of the Arab League boycott of Israel, refuses to fly Israeli nationals on its flight from JFK to London. Now, this is in violation of Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which declares that anyone who is denied services based on their race, ethnicity, or national origin, that is an unlawful form of discrimination. Kuwait Airways is operating in violation of the Open Skies Agreement, and it's operating in violation of its own lease with Port Authority that owns the airport JFK. So it is availing itself of the privilege of doing business in the United States, but doing so blatantly flouting the law, discriminating against Israeli nationals, and it is not acceptable. And they've been doing this for over a decade.
Wow, I mean, that would be like a South African airline saying, we're not going to fly any blacks from New York City. Exactly. And just getting away with it. The fact that you say it's been going on for 10 years, in a way it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I don't know why any Israeli would choose to fly Kuwait Airways, but,
not. It offers a cheap flight from JFK to London. And, you said it quite right when you said, could you imagine if an airline decides we have a policy where no blacks allowed, or no Mexicans allowed, or no Colombians allowed? There would be an outrage. But when you have an Arab League boycotter operating in this country saying no Israelis allowed, why? Because Israel is the Jewish state and we hate Jews and want to boycott Jews. Apparently, that's been okay with the Department of Transportation and the Port Authority. So we at the Lawfare Project said enough is enough, and we worked together with an amazing attorney, Ezra Levant, who's actually representing an Israeli national, Mr. Eldad Gat, who is suing the Secretary of Transportation at the Department of Transportation, claiming that his civil rights have been violated, and rightly so. And just recently, the Department of Transportation came down with a decision saying that indeed Kuwait Airways is operating in violation of the law, and Port Authority just sent a letter to Kuwait Airways demanding that it complies with the lease agreement. So we're going to have to wait and see what Kuwait Airways does. Either it becomes the first airline to break the Arab League boycott, and we congratulate it if it does so, or it gets kicked out of JFK. And let's hope it is the former.
Yeah, you're right. You know what? I have this secret dream when you just said that maybe you and the Lawfare Project seize a Kuwait Airways airline or something as some sort of penalty. I know I'm just daydreaming. That wouldn't happen here. But these bigoted bullies who get their way in most of the world through either fellow bigots in the Muslim world or through just plain old cash. I mean, Kuwait is an oil-rich member of OPEC, if I'm not mistaken. This is so important that in the land of the free and the country based on civil rights, that they be told you cannot behave that way anymore. Last word to you, Brooke.
I completely agree with you. And now it's time for the DOT and for the Port Authority to enforce the Department of Transportation's decision and hold Kuwait Airways accountable. There's absolutely no excuse for this type of bigotry. We have a principle in this country that everybody is equal before the law and everybody deserves equal treatment. And there's no reason why U.S. taxpayer dollars should go towards facilitating this type of civil rights abuse.
I tell you, it made me curious. I want to check and see if any anti-Semitic policies exist at Canadian airports too, at Pearson or Trudeau Airport or Vancouver Airport. You've planted a seed in my mind. Brooke Goldstein of the Lawfare Project, great to talk to you. Thank you for joining us today and in the early days of our new show here, and I hope that we talk with you again soon. Folks, don't go away after the break. I'll read you some viewer feedback from our debut last night. Stay with us. We've heard you loud and clear. You can't get enough Canadian conservative news and opinion. Why not check out our blog? It's all your favorite conservative bloggers together on a page called The Megaphone. Go to TheRebel.media/TheMegaphone or click on the Megaphone menu from our main page to check it out. Our last segment is on viewer feedback. Lots of tweets and emails in response to our debut show last night. Let me read a few of them. This one is from D. Kinnan, who tweeted, "From all the thanks and well wishes, I'd say Ezra Levant and The Rebel knocked it out of the park tonight." Well, thanks a million. I appreciate that. It was a team effort, of course. Our senior producer, Megan, and Hannah, and Justin, and Martin, too, which is sort of amazing to put on an hour of television like that with, what, 1/1,000,000th of the resources of the CBC? Of course, the key part was you, our viewers, who helped crowdfund the studio for us. Thank you. Here's Frank's tweet. He said, "Ezra, outstanding opening act. As I watched the CBC, I realized the importance of the other side of the story. Don't let up on the Pinkos." Thanks, Frank. Exactly. I mean, the other side of the story, especially on important subjects like Trudeau's risky plan to bring in 25,000 unvetted Syrian migrants, literally plucked out of a terrorist war zone, and to house them before they're screened in our military bases. Whose insane idea is that? Yet the CBC and the rest of the media party just love it. Here's Joanne, who says, "Fascinating interview with Joe Oliver. I think we're in for a rough ride, but I'm still optimistic." Hey, thanks, Joanne. I enjoyed seeing Joe Oliver again. He's a smart cookie. He was strong as finance minister, but my favorite was when he was the energy minister. Even now, he's still fighting for oil pipelines. I see he has an op-ed in the Globe and Mail today calling for Canada not to rely on other countries to get our oil to market for us. Marius writes, "I really enjoy the show. The only thing which bothered me was the sound, kind of deep. A little better than during election, but still not very good. But great show, thank you. Hey, thanks, Marius. I want to let you know, and our other viewers who have mentioned that, we are aware that we have audio issues that we still need to iron out. We really noticed them on election night, and we've put in a lot of acoustic foam in the studio to deal with the echo. We're still fixing audio issues. We had an audio expert in just today. We're going to continue to work on it, probably by trial and error over the next week or so. So we'll also fix some visual effects issues at the same time, but we're getting there. Literally every day we are making an improvement here, an improvement there. We are building an alternative news network in real time, right before your eyes. It's pretty exciting to do. In a way, it's sort of vulnerable because you see our little bumps in the road as we make them, but so what? We're not pretending to be a $1 billion a year subsidized government news agency. We're the people's news agency. We are funded by you. So yeah, we're going to have a few bumps in the road. We've come a long way since we started literally in my living room in February. So I want to thank you for your help and your patience. Now, here's one guy who didn't like us. Luke Savage tweets, "In the saddest announcement ever, Ezra Levant presents a brand new show featuring Ezra Levant on the channel run by Ezra Levant." You know, it is sort of funny, of course, but that is my name. That tweeter is Luke Savage. He's a former staffer to an NDP member of Parliament. So he's not used to media with a conservative tilt like we are. I mean, it's so rare in Canada to have a conservative journalist, so he doesn't know what to say in response. He thinks it's sad, really, here at The Rebel. You know, after the show, we bought a bottle of bubbly and we had a toast to go from our first video taped in my living room to having a full-length TV-style show in a beautiful virtual studio in less than 9 months. Why, that's less time than from conception to the birth of a baby. I think last night was a time for celebration. But I can see why a New Democrat would be sad about it. Look, keep watching and keep sending in your tips for improvement. Keep supporting us, and we'll try and live up to your support. We'll try and be worthy of it. I'm Ezra Levant from all of us here at The Rebel. Have a good night.